Okay, folks, good afternoon. My name is Rahil. With me, I have the CEO of a very hot Indonesian startup, Jeremy from Arami.
Hi everyone.
We have the incredibly attractive Semin An from Rakuten Ventures. And from Singpost, we have Yvonne. So basically, we're here to ask and answer one simple question. What's e-commerce going to look like today? What's it going to look like tomorrow? And what's it going to look like a couple of days from tomorrow? With a focus, of course, on Southeast Asia. So let's just get off this. Let's start off with a meta look. Where are we right now with e-commerce scene in this part of the world?
E-commerce it has developed a lot, it's matured a lot. It's actually folded in a lot in the past 3 years. As an investor, I've been looking at how a lot of the e-commerce companies have tried to approach rolling into Southeast Asia. And one of the mistakes that a lot of the companies have made is actually having a Southeast Asia strategy. There is no Southeast Asia strategy. There's an Indonesian strategy, there's a Thailand strategy. And I think the lack of localization taught a lot of the e-commerce companies a lot of lessons. And you can see that there's a lot of niche startups in places like Thailand and Singapore popping up, developing meaningful economic value, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming years.
Okay.
Well, I agree with Sammy. So if you take a look at the ecosystem, a lot of the companies that you see today are, consolidating, being acquired by companies, and there are like two camps: people who are like pessimistic and optimistic about e-commerce scene. But one thing that I'm a firm believer on is that you need to take a look also at the supply side of stuff. So companies that are supplying different technologies to support e-commerce, and I think that if we're to look at the future, this is where I'll be looking at. So not so much on the the pure B2C concept, but people who are supplying different technologies to empower the e-commerce startups and the e-commerce companies that are emerging in the next couple of years.
Well, 7 years ago, actually, I came in the region. I started in Indonesia, and their internet penetration rate was probably 0.01%. And for the last 7 years, I was working in e-commerce in the region, and every time I went to a panel or like presentation is when the e-commerce boom is going to happen, right? And really what we started to see is over the last 12 months, there was a massive inflection point, especially we can name definitely Lazada with Alibaba. It really showed a milestone in the development of the overall ecosystem. Today we can see, depending on statistics, e-commerce is probably 3% of retail, and is actually catching up, actually growing faster than what we saw in China a few years back. So when we look at the e-commerce, I think it's really now that we reach an inflection point. There are still a lot of questions around what's the right strategy to attack South Asia and how to differentiate in terms of model. But I do believe that, for the last 7 years, I saw this is an exciting time for us.
So, in the past couple of years, we always hear that Southeast Asia is going to be the place for e-commerce. It's small enough, people are advanced enough, it's going to be amazing. But we're not quite there yet. So what do you guys think are some of the main pain points affecting the strata of e-commerce in the region?
Well, so many. So I'm coming from a logistics point of view right now, and one of the biggest issues that we have not yet solved, both as a company and as an environment, are like things in the logistics cross-border networks and the payments, cross-border payments as well. Actually, I feel that this is something that is a huge hindrance to e-commerce growth. There are other improvements, there are tons of improvements, but I think more can be done in the space to help grow the entire ecosystem as a whole. And that's why earlier on you heard from Stripe, Alibaba and WeChat is coming into the system, into the ecosystem with their payment gateways as well. Apple Pay is here. So I think you're going to see a very exciting couple of next few years when all of this come together and grow the entire ecosystem. So, yeah.
My sentiments are pretty similar, but again, I want to make sure that the audience understands that a lot of the approaches that we saw before, 3 or 4 years ago, the approach now has to be radically changed. If you look at what is e-commerce going to be in the next 1 or 2 years, I think Singapore follows the most congruent path to what other countries have done in terms of maturation. But if you look at countries like Indonesia, where you have thousands of islands, highly fragmentation of language and culture, and even basic geography, I think how you develop what we understand as online commerce or even mobile commerce will be very, very different. and probably the entrepreneurs on the ground in Indonesia will understand even better than us sitting here among us.
So I think like when we speak about logistics, we need to acknowledge that there was still a lot of improvement. So again, when we look a few years back, you were ordering a product and receiving like maybe 3 weeks later. Today, if you take Orami, you order it in Jakarta, you receive it the same day, and very soon you will receive it in a couple of hours. Now saying that definitely upcountry is still a major challenge to basically be able to penetrate a lot of the potential customers there, I think is one. The second one is cross-border. So cross-border just started, and I think is still a very big challenge for e-commerce companies to crack. For us, we are in Thailand and Indonesia, and basically we ship products within one country to the other, and we can see that in terms of cost, in terms of legal issues, is extremely challenging to actually be able to scale that model. At the same time, we believe that the first one who succeed to get it to scale will have a competitive advantage there and will be able to basically capitalize on this. I think the third big challenge that I see is definitely talent. I mean, I think like in many conferences you hear about this, but e-commerce is still very recent, still a couple of years old actually in the real, I would say, B2C and marketplace model. And it's very hard to actually be able to get the right talent. And this is a very, I would say, a big bottleneck for us as we scale the business.
So as you mentioned earlier, Seamin, especially, about Southeast Asia being a very fragmented market. So when guys like Rocket, for example, first came to this region, they were, let's hit everything with the same bat. So would you say that overall this has harmed the region or not?
I think if you look at it in terms of a different scope of short-term, mid-term, long-term, there's always pros and cons to this. But I think if you look at the mid-term, it's always helpful that the market gets more educated. It also helps the entrepreneurs on the ground understand, wow, this was a very, very big undertaking they did. They had some progress, but they still had giant amounts of deficits that they still haven't solved, even after the majority take-up of the Alibaba group. So I think overall it's been a very good education segment point where through the pains of bigger companies, you become more contextualized and understand how to make yourself meaningful economically in your locale.
So from what I've noticed, now there's more of a focus towards niche e-commerce. You focus on shoes, you focus on tech. So for example, Jeremy, with Orami, you have decided to focus solely on women in Indonesia. Could you talk us through a bit about why you did that and how's it worked out so far?
Well, first I see that I think e-commerce is still at a very early stage in innovation. The woman positioning that we have is quite unique in the world, and we are very proud of that. We really believe that actually South Asia will start to see innovation which could actually scale outside South Asia. I mean, why we strongly believe in the woman? Because we see like Tmall or Taobao, probably 70 to 75% of their customers are women. It's the same in the region, but no one is focusing on this demographic. I will give you an example which will make it very easy to understand. If you focus only on teenagers, then obviously your range of products, your experience on the site, the way you gamify the experience, the way you operate your products will be very different. And that's the same when you focus on women. We believe they are the game changer of the region. They are actually the one which are driving the change, especially in digital and in e-commerce. And that's why we felt that our positioning has a lot of depth, and so far we get very good traction there.
Any plans to go beyond the women demographic, or is something you're going to stick with?
Well, it's already huge. I mean, when we look at how much influence women have in the purchase, is close to 80% of everything that people purchase is driven by women. My wife is buying everything for me, and I guess it's a little bit the same for every man around. So we believe this has so much depth, and we can go so deep in these demographics that actually it gets us massive potential of scale.
So of course, e-commerce isn't just something for young, hip startups. I mean, some of the world's largest e-commerce providers are actually legacy companies, guys like Walmart in the States. So Singpost has actually been a source of pride as a Singaporean for a legacy company that has really embraced e-commerce. So I'm wondering, Yvonne, if you could sort of talk us through the hows and the whys.
Yeah, of course. So we're Singapore Post, and if you guys know, our mainstay business is in selling stamps. Okay, but can I have a raise of hands to see, like, have any of you sent a letter in the last 6 months? Not that, okay, that is like what, 10% of the people here. That's not gonna last us forever, okay? So 5 years ago we decided that, hey, something needs to change. The entire world is not sending as much letters as we prefer it to be. So we decided to change and disrupt our own business by going into the e-commerce logistics and e-commerce business. And so we leverage on the same network that we already currently have, which is the mail distribution, to leverage on that and build an e-commerce logistics platform on top of it. And that's the reason why I say cross-border still has a lot of way to go, because we're just getting into it, but hopefully we'll do more in the next couple of years.
Another word that gets thrown around a lot is O2O. I hear about O2O maybe every other day, and until now I don't properly see a good implementation. So I'm wondering if you folks will sort of talk us through why O2O hasn't reached that messiah. It's like a messiah thing. Are we there? Are we going to get there?
I mean, for me, when I look at O2O again, it means vastly different things compared to, depending on what country you look at. If you look at Taiwan, O2O is quite developed in the perspective of pickup, buy and pick up from convenience stores. And if you look at O2O in China, it means something completely different from basic royalty customer management to even going as deep as rudimentary ERP. So, but when I look at O2O as a consumer end product, I think there's been, and I think venture capital has a lot of influence to do with this, in that we kind of mutated the idea of O2O of a profit generating center instead of more of a retention and value adding center. And I think in many ways, if you look at where the market needs to go for O2O, it needs to stay true to becoming the right connector of the online and the offline world, and a little bit away from doing incentivized pickups or incentivized acquisitions or consumptions.
Yeah, I mean, there's I think definitely a lot to say about O2O. I think one example, that I can give you in my previous company, actually, in France, was doing roughly $2 billion sales. They had 50,000 pickup points, and it represented 30% of their volume. So definitely there is a huge potential. When we started to build a business in Thailand, we actually partnered with a retailer named Big C. With this retailer, what we did is they give us their database of customers, and we could actually speak to their customers to go to the e-commerce site, and it worked extremely well for us. At the same time, with the data we had, we could see who were the competitors of Big C buying on our site, and we could actually send this type of demographic and of data to Big C. It was, I think at a small scale, it was very successful for us. So I think definitely how I see the future, I think this initiative will come more and more, and there will be way more business coming from O2O. I still believe that exactly what I say, we are just inflection point of the e-commerce, and I think O2O will be probably the next driver of our growth.
But one thing for sure, I agree with the rest of the panelists said. O2O is something that is, people's been talking about it for the last, 3-4 years now, but no company has kind of really mastered, what does O2O mean, what does omni-channel mean, all of this thing is kind of ambiguous. But one thing for sure though, if you talk to the brands, if you talk to people who are retailers, they're doing O2O not for the sake of for a press media release, that's past gone. But more of these companies are doing this for cost optimization, for a better customer enhancement experience. So it's difficult if you are considering O2O, if you're considering omni-channel, kind of define what is it that you want to do within that category, because it can be anything from the CRM system to communicating with customers to what you design back-end to fulfill the customer's orders. Understanding that, giving it a better understanding and KPI would be beneficial for the rest of the team as well, to understand if O2O is something beneficial for your company. So that's what I think. And just to add one more note, which is that O2O requires more than just putting in different systems and duct taping them together, right? You have integration with your ERP systems, your POS systems, your e-commerce CMS systems, and your order management systems, and and your customer care for sure. And this entire ecosystem right now is not being developed with the mind of them talking to one another. But I think in the next couple of years, you will see some companies, be it startups or existing legacy companies, who will start designing products in terms of creating this ecosystem from the scratch and not just sticking, different parts of different systems together. I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple of years.
Okay, that is interesting. So another big vertical we're seeing the rise of, especially here in Singapore, is the second-hand marketplace. Guys like Carousel, guys like Shopee. So As an investor in Carousel, Mr. Seminan, where do you feel this market is heading?
If I knew that, I'd invest in another carousel in a different country. But I mean, for Singapore specifically, carousel is not something that's revolutionary or like game changing. It's in many ways reimagining and making more efficient what the next generation of the C2C and listed marketplace are interacting with their merchants. That's all it is. And what the carousel team has done so amazingly is that they've developed a loyal community around buyers and sellers that enables them to become relevant in the marketplace. I mean, you can remember like 3 or 4 years ago, everyone would go to Gumtree or ST Classified or whatnot. Now people are slowly and surely aggregating towards Carousel just because it provides the same utility but also the same level of trust that they come to expect in a transaction. So I think in this perspective, we'll see more of Carousel becoming a very dominant and trusted source for transactions. And a listings marketplace, even in Singapore alone, even for incumbent companies dealing with only a population of 4 to 5 million people, is a $100 million business. It's a very material part of our ecosystem and our economy.
Well, I definitely think that when you look at e-commerce, there are so many different models. And as an entrepreneur and as a leader, there are some models you like and believe to a certain extent that you want to drive this business. So for us, it's very different because we are mostly B2C and curated marketplace. What it means is we take an extreme care of the product we are selling. Especially when you sell products to women, and one of our core categories, mom and baby, you want to make sure that the milk or the diapers or the toys for the kids actually have been QC, they have the right quality, they arrive on time. So I think it depends of like what you believe and what you are driving. That's how I see it.
So I have a hypothesis that kind of seconds what the rest of the panelists said. So about the secondary market. So I've been based in China for the last 1 year, and something that you see really prominent there is there are a lot more people now in the middle class. So people who are like from not earning a lot, lower middle, to like now middle class, and you see a lot of people who are like top tier end of China also spending less money. So actually the middle class is not just supported by the increasing income from the lower middle, but also decreasing spending from the upper, right? And so what you will see here is also people who are getting smarter about the things that they buy. Now the secondary market existed for a long time. Look at SG Car Mart, right? This is like one of the most epic secondary market for like cars in Singapore. And so a lot of my hypothesis, and this is just a hypothesis, that you will see a lot more people transacting in secondary market and also dispelling the social the thoughts like it's not first hand, so I'm not going to buy it. I think a lot of people are not going to be so particular about that anymore. So I hope that I see in the next couple of years that people are smarter about things to buy.
So for companies, startups especially, that are young guys that are looking to get into e-commerce, are looking to make a name in this big industry, there's two basic schools of thought, either mass market or niche. I know we discussed this earlier with Orami, but what I'm wondering is, if I want to start my own e-commerce business, is it best for me to choose one market, one product, or to sort of go out there with a shotgun? See?
I mean, I think it'll depend on what kind of founder you are. If you're a super technical engineer founder that can build the next Magento that eBay owns right now, then you go technical and you go broad and you help, a lot of the e-commerce marketplaces that exist right now develop the next generation of low latency, low cost, e-commerce transaction platforms. If you're a business-minded e-commerce founder, then you want to look at definitely what kind of niches that you can be actually more relevant into. Everybody thinks that the sneaker business is a small business. The sneaker resale business is like a multi-billion-dollar business every single year. So as long as you find a niche that is more meaningful to yourself and you understand, the higher chances of what you find success will come.
Well, I think if you look at the market, no one really wins. I mean, there's definitely Lazada clear leader with Alibaba, but the market is still extremely fragmented. So depending on the vision, the positioning, basically the experience you want to build can be very different. If you look, for example, at back in the days, there was a sale of Luxola to Sephora. That was a regional model based on a vertical approach. And this vertical approach was actually quite efficient to some extent because they were having an edge. They had products that other countries could not have. And so I believe it really depends on the model and the products that you want to bring. So it cannot be yes or no. It really depends on what e-commerce you have in mind. What do you want to build? Which type of products? Which demographic you are speaking to?
Okay, let's talk a bit about funding. So, as we all know, there's a I hear about a new e-commerce startup every other day. So, especially for an investor like yourself and for you guys, how would I go about getting your attention? What do you want to hear from a startup that wants to get into e-commerce? Basically, how would you give me money?
For me, in many ways, I didn't necessarily invest in Carousel specifically because it was an e-commerce company or it was an online transaction company. I did it because the founders had an amazing ability to build a product that got the community together to interact with one another. And that interaction manifestation was the transaction of secondhand goods. That's why I invested in the company. So in this perspective, you should find the investor that fits your case, right? If you can build a very high growth, high top margin business, you should go to investors who've actually participated in the Rocket, the internet groups and whatnot. If you've looked at more niche marketplaces, you should look at who invested in Etsy and look at one of those investors' investment profiles. But definitely every single time I try to talk to a founder who talks about how do I get investment, I would say stop spending 12 hours on your PowerPoint and research your investors and see who is right for you.
So this is particularly for you, Yvonne. So last mile, it's a big problem for a lot of e-commerce people. So what are guys like Singpost doing to make it easier for e-commerce players, especially in markets like Indonesia and Thailand, to sort of make it better?
So it's very hard. Like we're definitely realizing that Southeast Asia is not Southeast Asia. I'll give you an example. Like, so if you're looking at pop stations is not a vastly new concept. DHL has been doing it for a long time. Amazon's been doing it for a long time in the US. Singapore has taken off really well. Like, if pop station is on your site, we see that 30% of the people who are shopping on your site would choose to deliver to a pop station than to your home. And we experimented this in Hong Kong and Indonesia, and we have like different hurdles. So I'll give you a concrete example. Like, say for example, the pop station lockers requires like a security camera, like looking at a pop station locker to make sure that people don't steal stuff, right? Or like try to carve out the thing and steal the things inside. But if the country's infrastructure for like Wi-Fi is not robust enough, we cannot be in the country. If the rural area is too out of the way, then the value of products in the parcel is going to be higher than some people's income. It cannot be there as well. So we don't really have like a global or Southeast Asia strategy for Singpost. Instead, we're looking at each country by itself and finding out the best way to create a new product or work with a local partner to serve what is most needed there. Cash on delivery is not something that's used popular here, but look at Indonesia. If you're not on cash delivery, forget about e-commerce business, right? That's not gonna happen. So do we have like all the answers for Southeast Asia? I think we're getting there by working with partners and people like Samin and Orami, but I think there's more to be learned, and as the ecosystem changes, consumer behavior changes, as payment gateways come into the scene, we will see a lot of more differences and innovation come in the next couple of years. Yeah.
Okay. Oh dear, we don't have much time left. So let's end off with predictions. So where are we going to see e-commerce, say, in the next 5 years in the region?
So one thing, I think, look at the supply side of things. So supply side, like platforms like Carousel, look at POS systems, OMS systems. All of this trends about O2O is going to help encourage more innovation in the supply side of things to empower e-commerce. Second, I think secondary market is something very interesting to look at because people are getting smarter about things to purchase, why they purchase certain things. Third thing is cash flow. So like look at the market economics right now, right? A lot of the hypes about tech startups, about different valuations. I think a lot of people here know better than I do, like some of the companies have been down valued and some companies have been acquired. So cash flow is going to be something that people will look at a long time, for a longer time right now.
Again, as an investor in the next 5 years, you will see like a high degree of consolidation. You'll see, and if you were trying to rope in India also as Southeast Asia and whatnot, or thematically rope it in, you'll see a lot of micro fold-ins because a lot of these countries are trying to manifest growth through the usage of investor money and subsidies and whatnot. So you'll see consolidation and micro-fold-ins throughout the region. Again, as mentioned before, you'll see specific niche verticals becoming much more stronger in their ability to become profitable and sustainable. And I think, at least in 2016 and 17, what I do see is, in many ways, for the e-commerce or commerce vertical specifically, a flight to safe harbor, as in you'll see more stable companies getting the brunt of the liquidity for their companies to become more stable and sustainable. And you'll see some of the smaller companies fall in line in terms of trying to become much more profitable in a quicker time span and timeline.
Well, I think it's interesting. There was a Mary Meeker slides of 2016 trends, and basically she was like comparing US and China. And so in US, when you look at the top 10 retailers, Amazon is only top 5, is only like number 4 or 5. If you look at China, you have Alibaba number 1, JD number 2. If you look at South Asia, in 5 to 10 years, the top 5 will only be on e-commerce, because retail never consolidated, which means there are way more opportunities for e-commerce in South Asia than anywhere in the world. And Orami will be there.
On that note, thank you so much for your time, folks. Thank you.